your hair is so much longer, your biceps are so much bigger, and you're just a better human being because you practice that much. How do you know that you're practicing too much? How do you know that you're practicing too little? This can really plague especially beginner through intermediate musicians. I'm Robert Monroe. I've been playing the piano for almost 30 years, and I have gone through this myself. You really want to make progress, but you find yourself hampered by this thought, this sort of ghost that haunts you of going, well, I'm not at the piano, so obviously I'm wasting my time. But here's the deal. It's really important to both get enough time at your instrument and at the same time get time away from your instrument, living life, both from a recovery standpoint, from a mental standpoint, from a psychology standpoint, but also from an experience standpoint. It's so important to be able to have experiences to then add into your music and make that much, much more impactful. So I first want to kind of go over the extremes and bring a lot of anecdotal evidence, experiences in my life of when I probably was practicing too much and then when I probably was practicing too little, what that looks like. I want to talk about some best practices after that, and then give you kind of, in my idea, the utopian scenario, right? Just idealistic scenario where it's sunshine and roses and we all turn into little Michel Camillos and Rubinsteins and Rachmaninoffs and we just live happily ever after. Or Lang Langs, if that's your cup of tea. Well, let's start out with the not practicing enough. And here's the thing, it's kind of like working out. As much as we love to watch videos where they're talking about overtraining and doing too much, deep down inside, if we ask ourselves and we flex our muscles, we realize maybe we're on the undertraining, not overtraining side of the pie. And in many ways, I would love for you to have a good hard look in the mirror to yourself. I won't do it to you. But look at yourself and go, am I practicing enough? And the answer is probably no. And here's the reason why. The honest truth is there is a very high threshold where another 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes at your instrument would not make you better. Because here's the thing. You have technical concerns and actual ability to move your fingers. That, I would say, the limit is different on each instrument, but if you have the fortune of having an instrument like piano or guitar, the limit is in the 6 to 8 to 10 hour window, depending on your physiology and where you are in your career. I would say beginner to intermediate, that's probably going to be much lower. It's going to be like 3 or 4 hours. But once you start to get into the expert advanced material, you literally can spend 8-10 hours on the piano, no problem, and your technique is just going to get better and better and better. Am I saying to do that? No, and we'll get into practicing too much in a bit, but that's the deal there. Now, at the same time though, that type of practicing really also we need that mental part. We need that mental engagement. But again, more for that on the over practicing side. Let's talk about signs that you're probably not practicing enough. If you forget what you did the last day, yesterday, you're probably not practicing enough. If you don't know, if you have a teacher and you don't know what assignment your teacher asked when you show up to the lesson, you are not practicing enough. That email, that note that they wrote down should be ingrained in your head by the time you come in next week. That is really what you're going for. That steady progress, hopefully day to day, but at least in a way that you make measured gains over week to week. Now, I got a couple rule of thumbs for you. The first is we've got 7 days in a week, right? Let's say we practice all 7 days. Well, just give yourself a nice +7. Fantastic, right? Well, let's say instead we practice 6 days and miss 1 day. Well, 6 minus 1 is 5. Not a bad score, but we could have done 7. How about instead we lose 2 days? We didn't practice for 2 days. Now it's 5 minus 2. That's a score of 3. Do you see where I'm getting with this? It starts to get a little worrisome pretty fast. Once we get down to missing 3 days in a row, or 3 days, however you want it throughout the week, we get to only a score of +1. So, what that kind of, again, just in a very loosey-goosey rule of thumb way is, if you miss 3 days a week, you are barely making any progress. And that's if you're a beginner or maybe an intermediate. You're definitely probably not making progress if you're advanced. Now let's flip it over and say that now you miss 4 days a week. Now it's a -1. You see where this is going. Then a -3, then -5, and then finally a -7. Again, are these made up numbers? They are, but they help to illustrate how even missing 1 day is not the biggest deal in the world, but as the days start racking up, it starts to push the momentum against you. Now, how much time should you be spending in that time period? Well, again, it can be all over the place, but what I found is you kind of have to have enough time to be able to touch everything you need to do in a given day. That's really where I feel like I never was practicing enough, was when I was in time periods where I could not play all the pieces that I wanted to play and do technique on top of that. Because that's really what you need to do. You need to be able to practice the pieces you're working on and technique. And then ideally, you're also doing some bit of music theory, composition, ear training, something of that amalgamation. But again, we'll get into more of that later. That's on the under training, under practicing side. What about the over practicing side? What does that look like? Well, the first thing I'd say is there is no limit, right? There are time periods in my life where I was actually playing 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, and it actually didn't feel like it. Why? Because I was breaking it up into different types of playing. When you are just doing scales nonstop, guess what? You kind of wear out. When you're just practicing one piece, you kind of wear out. Somewhere in that 2 to 3 hour time period, at least for me. I know some people who could do it more. I know some people who would do it way less, but you start to wear out. But instead, let's say you do some scales, then you do jazz band, and then you work on your classical pieces, and then you do accompaniment, and then you work on your classical pieces, and then you do some composition, then you work on your classical pieces, and then you go to another jazz combo, and then you work on your classical pieces, and then you do some scale, mindless scale technique, and then you play a gig. You may have gotten to an insane amount of playing, but it doesn't really feel like it. So why am I saying that there's still a possibility of practicing too much? Well, if you're mentally just toast, guess what? You've practiced too much. You can't make any progress if you're mentally toast. You really can't. You're probably actually going to make negative progress. So that's one. If your technique starts to get really, really sloppy, guess what? Again, you're not making any progress. If you physically start to hurt, also not making progress. If your sleep is getting compromised and you're not getting enough sleep, once a week, no problem. Regularly, big problem. Those are the type of things, and I definitely experienced this in college, all of those things, and those are the signs that you're practicing too much. So what is the happy middle ground? Am I gonna just tell you, hey, 45 minutes every single day, take a break on Sundays, you're good? No, because that's honestly not how it works. I would first say, in terms of days of the week, try to touch a piano every single day that you are alive. That is just a good rule of thumb. Whether it's a piano, whether it's your instrument, whatever it is, make sure that you touch it, you play something. Even if it's 30 seconds, it will make a huge benefit to you. That's rule number one. The second thing to think about is structuring your goals and then using that to figure out how much time you need to practice. So for example, right now in my life, I do not have a huge amount of time to dedicate to learning new pieces. I'd kind of like to, but I don't really have that time. So for me, it's more trying to hit up the basics, the scales, basic technique, and then running through songs that I need to play for shows. And so that may be anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour. But for example, let's say you want to learn a classical recital program and you have 4 pieces that you're learning for this. You may dedicate 15 to 30 minutes per piece, maybe even blowing that up to 30 to 45 minutes per piece, plus an extra 30 minutes for technique. As you can see, that's already going to be in the 2 to 3 to even 4 hour sort of time span. And that would be perfectly justified. Again, you're always competing against someone else who may be spending even more time than you are on it. Now, here's the deal. As well, don't do it all at once. Let's say that you are practicing for 4 hours. Run through your scales and then take a walk. Go ahead, jump into your first big piece, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, really concentrating. Get up, drink a glass of water. Now, we love our phones. We love to mess with our phones. That would be one type of distraction I would personally try to avoid. Because what you're going to find is you're going to pick up your phone and then you're going to realize that a half an hour went by instead of like 5 minutes. So when I say take breaks, I mean literally get up, walk around, sit back down. I don't mean pick up your phone, scroll TikTok for 5 hours, and then get back to work. We've talked about under practicing, we've talked about over practicing, and we've talked about some good ideas of how we set up really nice practicing habits and different things. And again, just to give you a general idea that I think would work really well for most intermediates, let's just posit it there. Shoot for an hour to an hour and a half, 6 days out of the week. And what you're really actually going to do is you're going to shoot for 7 and you're going to miss 1, okay? And that's all right. So you're shooting for 7, hour to hour and a half, you miss 1. You spend 20 to 30 minutes on technique. That is going to be your scales. That's going to be arpeggios. You're going to do metronome. You're going to do maybe a technique exercise, like a Czerny or a Hanon or a Brahms. And then you're going to spend another 20 to 30 minutes doing classical sight reading piano. That's going to be your classical piece. That's going to be something technically challenging, something you can sort of sink your teeth into. And then you're going to pivot from there to another 20 to 30 minutes of ear training. That's learning something by ear, that's playing some jazz, that's doing some chords, some theory, maybe composition. This to me is the golden triangle of progress. You're touching everything. And the cool thing is, let's say you're really sucking at one thing at some point. You have all these other ways to be in the game, to keep making progress, to feel good about your instrument. And ultimately, that's kind of where I want to leave this. The right amount of practicing is the one where when you get to the end of the week, you look back and you go, I feel good about this. I made some progress. Does it need to be mountains of progress? No, just make a little bit of progress. And each time you make a little bit of progress, you're going to get further and further and further. And before you know it, you look back a year and you don't even recognize who you are. You are so incredibly different. Your hair is so much longer. Your biceps are so much bigger. And you're just a better human being because you practice that much. I'm being a little silly, but you get my point. I'm Robert Monroe. I hope you enjoyed this. Until next time, keep on practicing.